This is a Wild Games Production podcast.
So this kind of came about because, Carl, you've been talking about this for the last little bit that I've known you, and like I see you post about it on your like on Facebook, and I've seen you talk about it a little bit on like various outlets and stuff like that, which is it's running an open table. My most recent BX game, it's done, it's over, and so I just kind of have to start again. And what I was thinking about doing was running an open table at my local game store, doing like I'm thinking probably I'm gonna do Keep on the Borderlands, but I don't know how to do this. I have no idea how to run an open table, so I kind of wanted to pick your brain about it.
Absolutely. I typically run a jump in, jump out. Feel free to sit down. Open table game. The last convention game I ran, I ended up with a table of 10 players.
Oh, wow.
Just because I was willing to take players where they didn't have anywhere else to go. So here are my suggestions for running an open table game. My first suggestion is make a sign. Make a easy to read sign you can put on the corner of the table that says, "You are welcome to join this game at any point."
That's such a simple thing. I wouldn't even think to do that. Just, I mean, it makes sense because it's like, all right, well, yeah, like players welcome. But yeah, like the thing is that I don't understand is, I guess, like how to do it. Like I understand the concept of it, people coming in and dropping out, but like I don't understand the execution. Like, so what happens if someone drops out? Like if they just have to go now? Like how do you handle that? How do you handle, one, I guess, size? Like if you are kind of short people or you're over people, like 10 people's it's not that much for like a BX game, because BX I think is a little more suited to having bigger parties. You know, you don't have the concept of the 4 like spec ops soldiers that you kind of get in modern D&D. So like having 10 dudes is totally fine, whereas it wouldn't be as good in like 5th edition. I don't know. I guess, like, how do you handle people coming in and dropping out? Like, what are some tips that you have for that?
I would say the best way to approach that is to focus on the fact that it's a game before focusing on the fact that it's a narrative.
Okay.
I think ultimately your players won't really care. You know, whether or not it makes sense that the dwarf warrior suddenly is no longer with you or not. Whatever the solution was, I don't think your players will care that much. I play whenever I get a chance in DM Crafty's game. He's a DM that runs games in the area, and he actually has built into his campaign world this idea that people phase in and out. Like there's kind of this constant teleportation filled sort of happening in his world. So he'll just say you'll teleport right in or teleport right out whenever you're ready, and he just makes it a part of his world. I don't know that that's necessary. It's a fine way to do it, and that way it's just an in-game description. That way nobody's freaked out by it. You don't even have to. You just shrug your shoulders and say, okay, well, that teleportation thing happened. Let's keep moving. Mm-hmm. Typically what I do is if somebody joins the game, I fill them in, and we kind of just pretend they've been there this whole time.
Okay, yeah, I guess that would be like the easiest thing to do. Even in my home games, when someone's not there from one week to the next, like say over the course of 3 games, they miss the middle game. It's like, no, they were here the whole time. They were just they were there. I don't do like a perfect recap. And I think your point about treating it as a game rather than a narrative, that's probably like the best way to do it. I mean, like that's been my philosophy going through D&D in recent years is I don't think people focus enough on the game portion of it. I think there's too much focus on the narrative, and I think it might end up bogging things down because at the end of the day, like whether you roll a d20 to do something or a d6, like you're playing a game. So when you have people jumping in, do you have them jump in and make a character, or I'm guessing pre-mades would be the best like solution for that?
I think unless you're going to simplify the system, I think even BX, as simple as it is, it's a little too complicated to roll characters and join in. Unless you have some level of assistance there, where maybe a co-DM or another player is able to help people kind of pick out their characters. How I do it is pre-gens. I have 3,000 XP pre-gens, which would be level 1 elves, level 2 wizards, dwarfs, halflings, fighters, and level 3 clerics and thieves.
Okay. Because I kind of figured pre-gens would be the way to go. That was more just like a dumb leading question. What I was doing was rolling a D3 per character when I was creating, like, on my lunch at work, I was creating a bunch of pre-gens for this. And like, I was like, all right, well, I'll roll a D3. And so like, I don't have a ton of pre-gens built up yet. This was mostly going to be an experiment at first for a group of friends to build pre-gens. But I did like each person got like a D3 level. But I think the 3,000 XP, I think that's a better idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of difference between a level 3 elf and a level 1 thief.
Yeah, and especially if you've got a stack for people to pick from, like a casting book or something like that. People are. The first person who's there is going to be like, oh, I want the level 3 elf. Like, this guy gets spells and swords.
Well, what I typically do is I hand out 3 and let the players pick 1.
Okay.
So instead of going, I mean, I'll have 20, I mean, sometimes 40 pre-gens. I don't.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. Is like, how many pre-gens do you bring when you're doing this? And then I guess like, how long do you normally run your jump in, jump out game? Do you just go till the last person leaves, or do you have like a set time frame? How do you how do you set goalposts for accomplishing things within the adventure?
Now, this is a kind of a one-shot trick, that I do. Is I have movable goalposts that I'm kind of moving them towards. So I make the goal either be something they're looking for or a person they're trying to engage, whether in combat or possibly to rescue. Mm-hmm. So that way, if I'm running within the world of let's say B2, I'm just going to run the Caves of Chaos. I'll have them run into somebody in the keep. So they're at the Keep of the Borderlands. And this person will say, my wife was an adventurer and she's not come back. So if you find any evidence of her out there, please let me know. I'm in this keep waiting for her to come back. And so what that provides me is they can just explore the Caves of Chaos all they want. But then at point X, where we have about 30 minutes left, I then put in the key to finding the wife. And they go down that rabbit trail. And then we have kind of a bookend for that session. Even though we haven't explored the entirety of the Caves of Chaos, at least this session has ended on a goal completed.
Okay. Now, I guess one question I have is, Keep on the Borderlands. It's a pretty big adventure. Like, I would absolutely never expect anyone to get through it all in one go. How do you set up this as like a campaign? Like, because I know you do a lot of stuff for kids and do like the jump in, jump out at libraries and stuff like that. Are you running these as campaigns, or are they just one shots kind of within the setting of the module?
Typically I'm running them as one shots. Okay. Now I have in the back of my head this idea for an ongoing campaign that is jump in, jump out, that I've been formulating, which is the idea is the world is controlled by 5 evil dragons. They have risen to power. And the conceit would be every single player character you meet, every single person at the table exists within this organization to take down these 5 dragons.
Okay.
So the world would continue to exist whether you show up that week or not. But there's never a question of, oh, are we supposed to trust this guy? Are they evil? Are they good? What would my character do? Because they're all in the same organization.
That is, I did a whole hour and a half rant about that on Critical Wits about being that guy, and oh boy,
one of my preambles at convention games is I say I'm only going to decide one thing about your characters, and that's that you're all buddies. Everybody here is friends with everybody here. Your group is a group of adventurers that are friends.
Even with that, do you find that you do you still get the trolley cool guy McShadow Ranger who's oh, my tortured past, I can't trust anyone, I never know when my father, the Duke, is going to send his spies against me?
Yes.
Okay.
I still get that. But then I say, okay, this guy's your buddy. So I have friends who are awkward, and they might say that they have friends who are awkward talking about me. That's fine. But, they're still my friends. I still want to see them benefit and succeed. And so if I were an adventurer and they were adventurers, I would still try to help them not get murdered by goblins.
I had another follow-up, but I'm just... the Duke. I can't even do that.
I would take that and run and introduce the Duke and just do that terrible John Wayne impression.
Oh, God.
Just ruin whatever concept this person had in their mind. Well, all right there, partner.
You're coming back with me. You're gonna be the crown prince whether you like it or not.
Are you enjoying the show you're listening to right now? Great! Why not head over to patreon.com/WGP and support that show for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month goes a long way to helping support the network of Wild Games Productions. Again, that's patreon.com/WGP. Thank you.
One thing that I want to do with my game is I downloaded some. I think they're made by Mad Irishman. There's some character sheets, BX character sheets, that have instead of having the attack matrix, it's got attack bonus. Just because I love classic D&D, and I wish that I could just teach people that all you have to do is subtract to use Thaco. It's super easy, or just roll a die, match it to this number on this matrix that is provided for you. But people, for some reason, can't wrap their brains around that and only want to use base attack bonus. But it has a notes section on this sheet. And so the thing I've been toying with is filling in details about the character. So when people jump in, they're actually, it's going to be their interpretation of the cleric who is a hard fighting, hard drinking, man of God, or Conan the Barbarian fighter, because I had to do it to him. Is that something you do with yours, or do you just give them just stats on a page?
The best pre-gen situation I've ever ran is where I provided some sort of outlying detail on each character that kind of could grab you, but was still a little bit malleable. So for a fantasy RPG, I might have something jump out on this sheet, if I have a dwarf character, one of the equipment items might be an unfinished collection of dwarf drinking songs.
Huh.
That builds in kind of this micro idea of what this character is about and what they want, without just saying, you're a hard drinking gruff dwarf and you love gold, and these are your personality traits. It just kind of lets that idea form in the player's head on their own.
Okay. See, because I'm kind of going with like providing those details about the characters. This person's tough drinking dwarf character, or this person's like kind of a Solomon Kane kind of cleric who is very you hunt monsters and very 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 invested in their faith kind of thing. But I don't know. I kind of I like either way, but I wonder. Have you found that people have been really receptive to those tiny details? Like, oh, this person's equipment says that they have an unfinished collection of dwarf drinking songs. Is that something that they've successfully gravitated to?
I mean, it depends a little bit on the player, and some players are more receptive to ideas like that than others. But that being said, it allows the player to form the idea as opposed to imposing the idea on the player. So, in the circumstance where I had it really mapped out, like this person's grubby and dirty and kind of a trashy person, if I had that on a character sheet, somebody might go, oh, well, I really don't want to play a character like that. Now I do hand out 3-pick ones, so they'd be able to pick others, but they might just immediately see that and go, oh, no. But if it just said that they had dirty clothes, then they may start the whole adventure looking, I got to get it laundered. I'm having a problem here. I got to get some... I mean, they might just create a little side quest for them, and you never know where that will veer off to. I think the people that wouldn't necessarily hop on board with the kind of the slight suggestion are also the people that wouldn't really hop on board with the full description.
With, so kind of... I have a couple other questions, but I'm gonna real quick. Just how do you handle equipment when you're making your pre-gens? Because the way that I was thinking about doing it with the sheets I have currently was I was just picking weapon, armor, maybe a backpack, maybe some torches, and then leaving the rest of that gold as gold and letting them buy things in game. I feel like as I'm saying that now and as we've been talking, like that's maybe not the way to do it. It would probably be better to like give them full adventuring gear, especially if they're drop in, drop out.
There is a fantastic character generator on Wizard Dawn.
Okay, like Don John?
No, what now? What did you say?
Oh, you've never gone to the website Don John?
John John?
Don John. D-O-N. It's French for dungeon.
Oh.
Sorry, I mispronounced it. Don John.
Oh, that one. And Magazine. You know And Magazine. Everybody knows And Magazine. You don't know And Magazine. You may know. I don't know.
I know And.
You know And Magazine.
Like, we've been to several parties together.
Oh, that's fair. So, Wizard Dawn is a part of And Magazine. So, it's wizarddawn.and-mag.com. Mm-hmm. And if you click on Dungeons and Dragons 1981 on their drop down, and then you click on Adventurers Guild, they have a character generator, and I click character sheets because I like having the actual character sheets. You pick a level range. So for thieves and clerics, I would do levels 3 to levels 3, and then it would only send me back level 3 clerics. And then I generate 4 clerics. You can choose whether they give you spell lists, equipment, whether they're possible to have magic items on the equipment. It can name the characters for you or not. It can choose alignment for you or not. It can choose languages for you or not. So I generate 4 clerics, and I usually find one that works pretty good. It's a random character generator, so sometimes you'll get stuff like 2 18s and 2 3s on the same character, which is a little bit extreme for a pre-gen, I feel like. I mean, I know it's mathematically possible to get those stats, but it is just a little bit jarring when handed a pre-gen to see like a bunch of 3s. It almost seems like it generates 3s and 18s a little too often. Like, I don't know what metric it's using to generate stats, but it provides equipment, and I mean, it has some of that stuff on it where people might have, like this character I just generated has a yellow silk handkerchief and a hacksaw and an hourglass. This is a cleric, a small bag of rocks, and it's like, well, what are you going to do with that? But people will start thinking about what they might do. Now, that's one way to do it. That's how I did for North Texas, just because I needed 40 of them. I didn't want to make a bunch of individual ones. I think ultimately I would like to have my own... I would have a little bit more control over what gets generated and how it gets presented. But I do think there's two ways you can do equipment. One is fully listed out, and that's what they have. And maybe have 18 gold or something, just a few pieces of gold coins on the sheet as well. Or just kind of be like, you're an equipped person if you have a basic adventure item you think your character would have, your character has it. Rope, grappling hook, caltrops, spikes, you betcha, you have all that. If there's a more kind of rare item you think your character might have, if you go, well, I want holy water, I want to have holy water, but I'm a halfling or whatever, but I think I should still have holy water. Just roll a d6. If it's 4, 5, or 6, they have it. If it's 1, 2, or 3, they don't. Or whatever metric you decide to measure that on, depending on the character and their reasoning. I think that's fine too. DM Crafty, when he runs games, he has people actually roll stats and choose a class, and then everything else he completely wings down to what your spells are and what they can do. Some of that is a little bit too, what's the word I'm looking for? Loosey-goosey for me, I guess. But I mean, it certainly works in the moment for sure.
Yeah. Well, I've been generating stuff by hand. I don't think I was gonna do as many. So how many pre-gens do you do for an FLGS game? Do you do 2 of each class, or do you do 1 of each? How does that work for?
Let me open my old pre-gen document that I had before I started using Wizard Dawn and see how many are in that. I think it's 3 of each.
Okay, not too bad. 21 characters.
Yeah, this looks like I had 3 of everything, except for some reason I only have 2 elves, which maybe I was just thinking, well, elves are more rare, so there should be less chance of having an elf in the group. I don't know.
I don't know if I want to use the donjon thing,
Donjon?
Donjon? Or Wizard Dawn, rather. Just because, you might run it. I've used, I don't think it was that specific one, but now that you've mentioned it, that sounds familiar with another online tool I've used, and I don't know, it makes me some weird characters. Like Donjon, they have a dungeon generator it's super good. I use it a lot to make dungeons for just floor plans, and they'll give you things filled in for the floor plans. And sometimes you get some weird fantasy stuff, which is fine. I love Gonzo and weird fantasy, but sometimes it's just this doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna just overwrite this. And I feel like Wizard Dawn is kind of doing the same thing.
Well, so when I use Wizard Dawn, I generate 10 characters at a time and find one I like, and then save that as a PDF.
Okay. I don't know. Part of me, I don't know. I feel like part of me wants to just make just make them by hand.
Yeah.
It's only 3 per.
That's definitely cooler.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know exactly when I'm going to be doing this game. So I have time. I have all the time in the world. How do you handle hirelings? Do you let them hire hirelings, or do you find that there's usually enough people in the game that you don't? Like you said, you had 10 in 1. I'm guessing that you didn't have hirelings in that specific game, but when you're running stuff at the library or the game store, or even in Crafty's game, how do you guys handle that?
I have never seen Crafty reference hirelings in my games. I really don't codify hirelings at all. You're absolutely able to recruit people and get them on your side, but it's mostly done through just role play and conversations with people in the town. It would really depend on how many people showed up that night, on whether or not they would want to seek out hirelings or not. I guess the issue that I could see arising is if somebody has 3 hirelings in game A. and there's 3 player characters, and one of the player characters has 3 hirelings, and that's game A, and then it's over. And you say, like, bring your characters back for game B next week, and they come to game B, and now you have 10 people at the table ready to play, and this one character still has 3 hirelings. It becomes a little bit of a murky issue because you don't want to tell that player, well, your 3 hirelings, you don't need them. There's all these other people. But you may just kind of define it as your character would save money in the situation and not pay these extra people to go with them.
It seems best to just cut out hirelings or limit them, to maybe 1 per person, or just have them be non-combat characters. But in my last game, hirelings were like a big feature, and we use it to pad out our numbers. Like in game A, when you have 3 people and 3 hirelings, you can kind of go on and feel a little bit safer about taking things on. And that was what happened in my last game. Was we had 3 players, and each player had 2 or 3 hirelings, and then eventually it got up to 5 players, and so we had a party of like 18, or not 18. We had a party of like 13 people, which was fine. Like it wasn't hard to do, but that was an every week same people game. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would be robbing the players of something by limiting it, but I think logistically you just have to.
All hirelings have a natural fear of crowds.
So if there's too many people, they clam up, and then they can't go in the dungeon anymore.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna go with.
Yeah. Have you run an ongoing hop in hop out game?
I have not. Every single time I've done something like this, it's been one shots.
Okay.
I love the idea of an ongoing shared world game where actions in game A have drastic effects on actions in game B, even if it's an entirely different group of people at the table.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, that's my understanding of how it was ran before it was even D&D. They had so many people, and they were, not everyone was playing the game at the same time. So you would have, within the campaign, you would have, blah, 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 in one game, and then you would have, other people in another, and they were kind of affecting each other, but indirectly. Which is kind of why, when you look at like original D&D, where Gary is like, yeah, this you can play up to like, you need like 4 to 25 people,
right?
And you're just like, 25 people, what the heck? But it's more than likely because they were running the campaign like a shared world. That's been my thought process on it for the longest time now. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe Mike Carr or whoever else was in Gary's early games can write into us at questions@saveordie.info and let us know.
Okay, so like I want to do a kind of a recap on what I think makes a successful open table. And I really do think the number one thing you can do to really create the environment of an open table is have a posted sign that's easy to read. I think mine says Dungeons and Dragons join anytime. That's all it says. And I put a graphic on there, and it's just on the edge of my table. But it removes that awkwardness of asking if they can play a game, because there's a little bit of discomfort in that, because there are certain games of Dungeons and Dragons that it's just for these people at this table, and that's all it's for, and it's set in motion, and they can't adjust at this point. And that's not the kind of game I run, but that's the kind of game a lot of people run.
I want to interject with that real quick, because especially if you're running it at a local game store, like the big beast is 5th edition. That's what people are playing. Like you can't get around it. Have you normally anytime I've like played BX, I've had to be like, all right, this is the 1981 game. It's a little different. Here's how. Have you had to have that kind of preamble when you're like introducing people, like, or has it, it being BX D&D, do you feel like that's driven people away who are like, "Oh, you guys playing D&D?" They're like, "Yeah, we're playing BX D&D." Like, "What's that?" "Oh, you ever seen Stranger Things? It's the version of D&D they play." "Oh, I don't want to play that. I only play 5th edition because I love Critical Role and the Adventure Zone. So, thanks for your time, Dungeon Master. I'll see you later."
I think a little bit depends on your enthusiasm when you approach the situation.
Okay.
So, like, when I tell people, I say, we're playing old school D&D. This is old school D&D. Get in, jump in. It's going to be really easy to learn. Let's play some games and let's just be real silly and have fun. I don't say, well, this is a little bit different than what you're used to. You might need to learn a few things or some different rules. I don't say it that way. I just say, it's a super simple old school version of the game. And I think that framing affects the way people react to it. I mean, it may feel like, oh, these people are saying, oh, this is not 5th edition, it's not for me. But they may be thinking, oh, this isn't what I'm used to. I'm going to be some sort of burden. I'm going to be slowing everybody else down. They're not going to want me to play. You know, there's all these levels of awkwardness that kind of float around the conversation that you can just subvert by just saying, no, come play. It's super cool.
I think that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. I think, like, you're right. Like, I think that's a good way to put it. Let's get back on track. Having a sign that says, come play. We're open to new people. That's tip number 1. Let's continue on from there. Take it away, Carl.
I would suggest absolutely having pre-gens at your table. I think it's the best way to approach it. I would not name the pre-gens or select their alignment if you're using alignment, or select their gender. I wouldn't fill in any of that stuff. I would just have the statistics and then hand out 3. Let them choose one, and then they can fill in the kind of personality of the character. They can name it, and they can choose all that information they want for however they want to represent their character. That way, there's a little bit of control that they have over their character. That
it makes it feel like their character,
right? As opposed to they're playing this already preordained personality that they don't have any way to adjust. I think even just naming a character is most of that.
All right, tip number 3.
Absolutely focus on the fact that it's a game and just play the game. Don't get lost in the mire of this narrative of why this person now can join the party. Just keep moving it forward. Even if you do stuff like, oh, you want to come in? Okay, I'm going to get you in the game just as soon as possible. Okay, in the next room you find a prisoner in a cell, and you can open up the cell and let him out. And then just say, now you're a group. You're in the party. That's the prisoner. Don't let them get lost in this mire of, but can we trust him? We don't know him. My character wouldn't do this or that or X or Y or Z. Because you're just having a fun time playing a game, and you only have so many hours to do it. And questioning each other and stabbing each other in the back, while maybe somebody's ideal game isn't mine. So just move forward and play the game.
Okay. Tip number 4.
I'm trying to think if I have a tip number 4.
Can I ask a quick question? I know we're in the summary section, but this kind of just came to mind, and I think this might be the most important question.
Okay.
How do you set this up with your game store?
That's a very different answer from game store to game store to game store.
Okay.
Because some game stores do have pay for play. If you want to come and use the space to play your game, you have to pay towards something. Maybe it's buying snacks, maybe it's buying a certain amount of product, or maybe it's just a straight fee that you pay to game at that store. And some stores just have free playing areas with the kind of general reciprocity idea. You'll put money into the game store because we're providing the play space.
Yeah.
Now, regardless of how it's set up, I would certainly call them first and saying, I'm planning on doing this. I would like to run a game of old school D&D or whatever version of whatever game you're wanting to run at your store. what methods do you have to communicate that to your player base? Now, they may have corkboard that you can plug a sign up into and just say when you're planning on doing this, or they may have a Facebook group that they moderate that you can post information up in there. Doing both isn't a bad idea. I ran into DM Crafty because I found one of his little, it was just printed out on paper business cards that he was looking for people to play old school D&D, and I emailed him and said, "Hey, I'll play in your game. I want to play games." I usually use Facebook to advertise when I'm going to be running old school games. Yeah, I mean, I think each store is going to have its own methodology of handling that, and I think you just need to communicate with the store what that is. But once you do have a date in mind, I would speak with them, because there are a lot of games the stores facilitate, and if it's during a night of a Magic release or a Warhammer release, you may want to find a different night to do it on. There's no reason to be competing with the space when what you're doing isn't connected to some sort of larger entity. You know, it's not pre-release Friday for BXD&D. Magic's the big one, but there are other games too that have big release events, and that might be even though it's not a huge deal with the gaming public at large, it might be that store's thing for whatever reason. There's a fan there that has cultivated that community.
What were some other tips we talked about so we can recap? We're real good at podcasting. I guess. God, what did we even talk about? Jeez Louise.
Oh, here's the thing that I want to mention. When you're running a jump in, jump out game in a public space like a store, is you will end up with a problem player at some point. It's going to happen. My advice when dealing with a problem player in a store environment or any environment, whether it's your home or a store or wherever this problem player has come into your game, is deal with them outside of the game.
Okay.
Never use the game mechanics to punish the player as opposed to their character. So if the player's being obnoxious in some way, shape, or form, and you want them to cut it out, don't just go, okay, Red Dragon shows up and kills you. Done. Now your character's dead. Because it's just really weird and awkward, and it doesn't really address the issue, and it also lets everybody else at the table know that I if I don't like you, I'll just murder you with imagination. It's such
I'll pretend kill you.
yeah. I'm willing to make this game not fun to prove my point. That's what it says.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, you're always going to run into problem players. We talked about that a little bit with, what was his name? Shadow Mc... Oh, I can't remember it. Mysterious McShadow Ranger, maybe?
Yeah.
And that's not
John Wayne's son.
Player, but, like, you know, people think that character type is cool, and, like, they're real lame. That's my opinion. But, like, having a person who's purposefully trying to get the party killed or doing dumb things in game because they think it's funny, like, then I think, like, it's perfectly acceptable to be like, just stop and be like, hey man, what you're doing right now is real disruptive, and, like, can you please get on board, or, you know, maybe this isn't the game for you.
Yeah, I think the way I'd approach it is just say, so, like, here's a kind of a normal example. I don't know why people do this, but say you're in the middle of a combat situation, and they go, I can cast Magic Missile on anybody? All right, I cast it on Joe. Ha ha ha! I'm casting my spell on you, Joe. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
At that point, just go, okay, hold on. There's lots of games like that. This isn't the way we play here. It's not the kind of game I want to run. So we won't be doing that.
All right. So I guess, like, that about wraps it up. You answered a lot of my questions, but I want to hear from the listeners at home. If you guys have any experiences running drop-in, drop-out games or open tables at your local game stores or conventions, or, you know, maybe even a play-by-email game or something like that, write us in at questions@saverdie.info. You can always also come join our Discord. We've been super active in that recently, actually, especially in the classic D&D chat. I got invited to a play-by-email game of OD&D using chainmail as the combat system, based on episode 146. So I'm super excited about that. I've been working on it all week. I'm super stoked. But drop by, come hang out with us.
Yeah, we've been talking about Thools today. Come talk about Thools.
I think that'll do it for this episode. Goodbye, everyone. We really need to develop an actual sign-off.
Well, let me tell you something, brother. The Save or Die Podcast Immortal Edition is a production of Wild Games Productions, brother. It is produced for entertainment purposes only, Jack. All other uses are prohibited, dude. So be sure to visit them at saveordie.info for more information, brother. What you gonna do when the Save or Die Podcast runs wild on you? Ooh.